I don't want no oil, a spoil in my shoreline. I like fish much better than crud. I like birds and things, a-creeping and crawling. Won't trade no more oil for blood. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that black demon oil's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. No nukes! Hello, and welcome to another episode of For a Green Future. My name is Joe DeMare, and I'll be your host for this very special hour where, as people know who've been listening for our whole 5 years, the first show of the next year, we like to go back over the previous year. So this show will be a compilation of clips and information from the shows that we did back in 2024. And as always, when I was going over our past year's worth of work here and looking at the different guests and so forth that we've interviewed, I was just amazed again at who we've been able to get and the issues we've been able to cover. It's really quite impressive. I mean, we have people from all over the world. We have activists, we have scientists, we have politicians. We've got, the whole spectrum of people that are working on environmental issues. And it's really important, I think, to hear their voices directly, because the media, tries to give us the impression that environmentalism is pretty much over, that people don't really care about the environment anymore. All they care about is getting to drive big cars and making lots of noise and pollution and stuff. And that has never been true, and it is certainly not true today, even though some people might say that we voted for candidates in this election that don't care about the environment, therefore we don't care about the environment. That's not true. Everybody across the board, conservatives, liberals, everyone says that they care about the environment. Now, we're not always making the best choices, but the people that I like to interview here have a handle not just on the way things should not be. They don't just fight against the way things are. They also have an idea of the way things should be, how we should get away from our unsustainable practices. And so it's very valuable to listen to them. And the first story that we're going to hear was actually our first episode from 2024. It's an interview with an Indigenous woman named Leona Morgan, who's with a group called Hall No, and she's talking about another friend called Clee Benali, who was a longtime activist fighting uranium mining and radioactive pollution, especially in the Navajo Nation. So let's give a listen to this first interview, and I'll be back to introduce the next clip. Welcome to For a Green Future. If you don't mind, could you please tell us your name and who you're with?
Yat e she e todich eatni nishle tana bisni bashishtin ki ani dashiche tohuglini dashinala. My name is Leona Morgan, and I am a co-founder and organizer with Hall No.
And I invited you on today. We'll talk about Hall No in a bit, but I wanted to talk about Clee Benali. And I have to say, I didn't know Clee. I actually didn't hear of him until he passed. But a lot of people that I know and that have a lot of respect for him were very saddened by his passing. Could you just tell us a little bit about him and the sorts of things that he's done.
Yes. Well, I worked with Clee. Clee was a co-founder of Hall No. We started Hall No in late 2016. Clee, Serena Riggs, and myself. And since 2016, we've just been focusing on stopping this mine at the canyon. So work with Clee revolved around protecting not just the area around the Grand Canyon, but sacred places, sacred elements, the water, and of course, all of the indigenous nations, all of the peoples from point A to point B. And so my work with Clee also included clean up the mines. Clee was instrumental in bringing this legislation that we were hoping would get picked up to clean up all of the abandoned uranium mines across the country. So we always talk about this number, about 523 distinct mines on Navajo Nation. Clee was not just talking to people on Navajo. He was working with indigenous nations in South Dakota and had built this network to create a database and then to start looking at what kind of mechanism can we put in place to clean up all of the mines across the US. And so this was how Clee was. He didn't just think about his own little backyard or just us as Diné people. He truly was thinking worldwide, especially when we're working on things like sacred sites, where we talk about Nihama, Nihasan, our Mother Earth. And I think from the outcry of condolences and support we're getting worldwide, his reach really was worldwide. And so for me, I do anti-nuke work. I'm an anti-nuclear activist. Clee called himself an agitator. And so, yeah, I'm looking more on the nuclear front. But Clee did, I'm only going to talk about a fraction of what he did because, to be honest, I consider myself a friend and colleague, but I didn't know all the things he did. I didn't know all the things he did. I learned a lot during the time that I spent after Clee's passing. His transition was on December 30th. And so for me, like I said, I didn't know him in all of the different areas of work, but he was doing mutual aid. He was helping to provide not only food and PPE during COVID, but I actually was able to go on a night patrol where they would gather all these donations of warm clothes, sleeping bags, anything to prepare unsheltered people in Flagstaff for spending the night outside. And so I've never done this kind of work. And I thought, how amazing, how much care he had for people, even, the people on the streets. But a lot of these folks are relatives. There was a lot of Diné people. There's a lot of people with substance abuse problems. And so those were the folks he was looking after. He also had a lot of work focused on supporting the trans community. Of course, women, we talk a lot about MMIR these days, which is missing and murdered Indigenous relatives. Clee also worked on media. I mean, he was just a guru at design and messaging and taught that to young people through Out of Your Backpack Media. Out of Your Backpack Media was a youth initiative where Clee worked with young people to learn how to do, how to shoot video, how to edit video, how to put together, a script, and then, post-production, all of that. And through this past couple of weeks that I spent in Flagstaff, myself personally, I went to Flagstaff on December 30th, hoping to visit Clee, and then ended up monitoring the mine. So I stayed in Flagstaff for a few days, and I was very fortunate and honored to meet many people who came out that he was working with, people who he was working with, learning about all the things he did. I mean, we know he just put out a book. He just put out a board game. We just did our last event on December 13th. He organized a community teach-in that was a hybrid event. He even edited the video. You can see it on our website. And so everything he did was rooted, very strongly rooted in our traditional teachings. As Diné people, we have cultural protocol, and this was the basis of Klee's work. I know he was very strict in how we did things, how we talked about things, how we started, how we, progressed. And it was mostly rooted in prayer. All of our work, it really wasn't for us. It was always for our people, but more so our future generations. And so some of the things, the foundations that he put down here will be carried on into the future. And I think that's why he was so prolific in the end to make sure he finished his book, to finish some of these projects, to get them ready for us to carry on.
So let's shift over to Hall No now. Just as sort of a background question, you mentioned how he fought to close the uranium mines or get them cleaned up, and that is, or that has been for many years, sort of an urgent question, isn't it? Because the tailings from those mines are radioactive, and they're not. The dust from them is also radioactive, and that is continuing to spread, right? It's been spreading since the mines were opened. Is that accurate?
Well, I think so. We have over one source. Clean Up the Mines. Clean Up the Mines was using the number 15,000 abandoned uranium mines. Just recently, I saw the number 20,000 abandoned uranium mines. So what this means are mines that were making a mess before regulations were in place to clean up that mess. And so the EPA wasn't formed until the 1969 National Environmental Policy Act. And so things didn't start happening until the 70s to enforce regulations. And even then, it's not like the EPA or the government is actively going out to monitor and watch these facilities. A lot of times the nuclear industry self-regulates, self-reports. And of course, if that's the case for mining and there's an accident, many times these things are not reported. So the amount of dust from accidents, the amount of contamination into our groundwater, that's one thing. But you can also look at what is uranium used for? So it's going into nuclear weapons and it's going into nuclear energy. And so arguably, we are, globally still breathing in the fallout from not just the Trinity site, the Trinity test, as well as the 2 bombs dropped on Japan, but hundreds, thousands of nuclear bomb tests. So all of that radiation and fallout is still circling the atmosphere. However, within indigenous communities where there's uranium mining, where uranium mining has taken place and where there's current mining, we, especially in communities of color, we don't get the best protections. We don't have, the information from the companies or the agencies, properly given to not just our colonial governments, like let's say the Navajo Nation, but if the Navajo Nation is not getting the proper information, the people living on the ground, the people that actually are breathing in the dust or drinking contaminated water, how would they know if the companies are self-reporting and then the federal government isn't doing its due diligence or abiding by its trust responsibility to make sure our indigenous peoples are informed when these things happen? And so this is exactly what's happening at Pinyon Plain uranium mine south of the Grand Canyon. And this is why Hall know our organization, we literally drive to the mine. We have people watching it because Energy Fuels and the U.S. Forest Service are not notifying our tribes in a timely manner.
So our next story focuses on something that was really one of the main reasons we created this show 5 years ago, and well, 6 years ago now. We're starting in our sixth year, and that is to point out the future. Our show is entitled "For a Green Future," and one of the biggest technologies that I think is going to come along is thermal storage of energy from wind and solar power. And that's why we interviewed Ziwhen Ma with the National Renewable Energy Laboratories, NREL, because he developed a system that used sand to store heat energy that was produced by wind and solar energy. And then that energy is there on demand when the wind stops or when the sun goes down. And it turns out to be like the cheapest form of storing energy. It's incredibly cheap, much cheaper than batteries, even cheaper than pumped hydro. And so let's give a listen to Ziwhen Ma.
Hello and welcome to For a Green Future. Could you please share with us your name and your title?
Yeah, I'm Ziwhen Ma. I'm an engineer at National Renewable Energy Laboratory, NREL, to develop renewable energy technologies, including solar energy, energy storage, hydrogen production, and storage.
So before we talk about the energy storage system you folks have developed, please give us a little background on NREL. What do you folks do? What is your mission?
Yeah, NREL is one of 17 national labs under DOE. We support Department of Energy's energy security, energy resilience, and lower energy cost mission to serve the national economics. We also, here at NREL, we are focusing on renewable energy that reduce carbon emissions and also provide reliable and economic energy supply for the nation.
So what exactly is particulate energy storage, and why would we need this type of storage?
Excellent question. So basically, this coming into more and more renewable come onto the grid, and there is a need of the energy storage with longer and longer storage durations. Currently, the energy storage is mainly focused on battery technologies. And for future, we foresee that more and more renewable energy need longer duration storage capacity so that electricity supply can bridge days that without sun and wind that cannot generate electricity from solar and wind power. This technology is aiming at several days of storage that need more than 10 hours that currently battery is in a few hours in a cheap and economic way so that we can continuously supplying power to the grid, to the end users and the area homes. So that's what we developed the technology that not using expensive material. We just use sand that can be mined in Midwest, and it's very lower in cost, come from ground, and it's contained in a insulated silos. We have collaborators in Northeast Ohio that support equipment, materials that enable this technology. So because it's using sand at very lower cost and also the concrete, the refractory material, so the cost is much lower than battery and also can generate larger capacity to drive a conventional thermal power generation. So therefore, it provides flexibility for the grid and reliability for power supply.
So you did a prototype plant and that worked well. What's the next step?
Yeah, great question. in 2021, we were supported by Department of Energy Advanced Energy Program called APRE. And at that time, we're in the low TRL laboratory testing of the prototypes and developed the whole system. So we gained the confidence from our laboratory test and also did all the preliminary design and the cost analysis and seized the potential for meeting the goal as stated above. And right now we got further support from DOE into a pilot stage that developed a demonstration technology that look into commercial relevant product scale that can be demonstrated in our scaling up work in the next few years.
So, this next interview is probably the one I'm proudest of for the entire year of 2024. Greenpeace is being sued for $300 million by the oil industry, and we managed to track down the lead attorney, Deepa Pedmenabba, and we got a nice interview with her. This is probably the single interview that I'm proudest of for the entire year of 2024. So this is an incredibly important issue because if the fossil fuel companies succeed in getting this tremendous penalty against Greenpeace for it will have a chilling effect on all organizations that do environmental work. So we got to hope that the courts come out on the right side of this one. But let's let Deepa talk to you herself.
Welcome to For a Green Future. Could you please start with your name and your position in Greenpeace?
Yeah. My name is Deepa Pedmenabba, and I am currently a Siegel legal advisor to the boards of directors for Greenpeace US and Greenpeace Fund.
All right. Well, welcome to For a Green Future. And before we talk about the lawsuit, could you please give us some background on Greenpeace? I mean, you folks have been around for a while, haven't you?
Yeah, no, I'd love to. So I work for the US office. So just so folks know, Greenpeace is actually a network of independent organizations across the world. So we have several offices. I'm sure people are familiar with Greenpeace in different countries in Europe, different countries in Africa. So we're all independent offices, and we're a global network, a global campaigning network. And as you mentioned, yeah, we have been around a while. We go back to 1971, and that's when a group of activists, set out on a fishing boat to try to stop the U.S. military's underground nuclear testing at an island called Amchitka, which is right off the coast of Alaska. And that's really where the idea of bearing witness, of nonviolent direct action became a part of our DNA and really continues to guide all of the work that we do now.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Glad you've been around. Many people consider this something called a SLAP lawsuit. That's SLAPP. Could you tell us what that means and give us some recent examples of SLAP lawsuits?
Yeah, so SLAP stands for Strategic Lawsuits Against Public Participation. And what these lawsuits are their attacks on First Amendment rights to free speech and assembly. And so when somebody, a corporation or a person with deep pockets doesn't like what, a critic has to say, they often file these types of lawsuits. And the important thing to know is that the intent of filing these lawsuits is not actually to win in court. It's really to sue people into silence just because of the amount of resources it really takes to fight these lawsuits. And, SLAPs are really a growing threat to organizations, to activists, and to everyday people who are just fighting to protect their basic rights to clean air and clean water. And one of the other interesting things about SLAPs is you often don't hear them. The fights are really designed to be in silence. And because most SLAPs are filed against everyday people, they generally don't make the headlines. And we have actually an anti-SLAP coalition that was formed when the first Greenpeace suit was filed, which I'll get into in a minute, called Protect the Protest, and it's protecttheprotest.org. And we have a whole tab of stories, so you can really get to know the stories of everyday people who are just doing their jobs or trying to protect their homes, and how they were hit with these types of lawsuits. So I know we're going to get into one of the lawsuits we're currently fighting, but I thought I would just quickly highlight that Greenpeace has been entangled in two massive lawsuits since 2016. The first lawsuit was filed by Resolute Forest Products, which is one of Canada's largest logging companies. And they sued us after we had a public campaign that exposed their unsustainable forestry practices. And a lot of similarities. It was the same law firm that brought the Resolute suit and brought the Energy Transfer suit. And one of the scariest things that both cases had in them were allegations of RICO, or the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act. So basically, what these corporations were saying was that our advocacy work was the same as work for organized crime. And the really good news is that we did get RICO thrown out of both lawsuits. And, this was really a threat to, to advocates across issue areas, because this idea that RICO could be used to go after just basic advocacy work was seen as a real threat. So fast forward from 2016 to just this year, we finally did defeat the Resolute suit, which was in California, and it unfortunately did take us 8 years to do so. So it shows you, the resources and the time commitment that's needed to see these lawsuits through.
And most people, I guess, don't have those sorts of resources.
Exactly. So it's really that the mere filing of these lawsuits often has the intended effect of silencing.
Right. So,
Yeah.
all right, let's get to this specific lawsuit. Who is suing Greenpeace? Why are they claiming they need to sue, and how much money are they suing for?
Yeah. So, while we had a wonderful outcome in Resolute, we still, as I mentioned, face a massive lawsuit in North Dakota State Court. And that lawsuit was brought by Energy Transfer, which is the company behind the Dakota Access Pipeline, and, the pipeline that was really subject to the resistance at Standing Rock. And they're suing Greenpeace for, and when I say Greenpeace, I just want to be clear, there are 3 different Greenpeace entities that are being sued. That is 2 entities in the United States, our 501c4, which is Greenpeace Inc., our 501c3, which is Greenpeace Fund, and they're also suing Greenpeace International, which is based in Amsterdam. And they allege, the lawsuit is for $300 million, and they allege that the Greenpeace entities orchestrated the entire resistance movement at Standing Rock.
So $300 million, that's kind of a almost unimaginable figure. I mean,
Yes.
how devastating would this be to Greenpeace, and what would the effect be on environmental activism?
Yeah, so I mean, any judgment even getting close to those numbers would be absolutely devastating to Greenpeace. I mean, we are a larger nonprofit, but we definitely don't have that kind of money in our bank accounts. So in terms of the actual potential impact, they are devastating. I think the question, and this is an interesting question, of what would the effect be on environmental activism? And the answer to that question, I think, depends a lot on how we collectively, as a broader movement, respond in this moment. So, how will companies, we know that other companies are looking at this, and they're looking at, of course, what happens in the courtroom, but they're also looking to how other organizations and activists are going to respond. Will this have the intended chilling effect? Or, my hope is that what they will see is the movement becoming stronger and louder, and that this fight does not depend on what happens in the courtroom, that they see a movement that's actually galvanized by these attacks, and that in the next 2 months, as we get closer to trial, that's what we want to see. We want to see more people speaking out. We want to see more people standing in solidarity. We want more people to say that it doesn't matter what happens in the courtroom. Like, Greenpeace is much bigger than the entities themselves. Greenpeace is a movement, and it doesn't matter what happens. This is a losing tactic, and you will only bring us together and make us louder and stronger.
All right. Well, And speaking of that, this is sort of a broader attack on protest itself, I think. And the whole country supported the protests at Standing Rock. I mean,
Right.
I stand with Standing Rock. There were T-shirts, there were banners, people had signs everywhere, all over the country and the internet.
Right.
I remember Seneca Nation of Indians had a big banner across the bridge on I-90 saying, "We stand with Standing Rock." So why is Energy Transfer trying to rewrite this as some kind of Greenpeace conspiracy?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So I think there are a lot of answers to that. I think first and foremost, like Energy Transfer and the fossil fuel industry, they don't believe in the power of movement. They don't believe in the power of solidarity. I think that they truly believe that for Standing Rock to become what it was, there had to be some really big organization pulling the strings, right? Paying people, orchestrating it in its entirety. I don't believe that they think that people could come out on their own volition, on their own commitment to the cause. There had to be somebody or some massive group, and they picked Greenpeace. Greenpeace, if they can kind of take down Greenpeace, if they can silence Greenpeace, if they can intimidate Greenpeace, I think the idea is that then who's going to come out and protest, right? Everybody will be intimidated if that chilling effect is successful. And so going back to the last question, that's why it's so critical how we respond at this time. Because if they can scare an organization like Greenpeace into silence, who else will dare protest? So I think there are multiple reasons why they're going after Greenpeace. But I do think that as a whole, there is this idea that somebody had to be orchestrating this. And the truth is if in the next project, a company has to face a resistance like they did at Standing Rock, that is a real threat to business as usual. And so while the interesting thing is that, this is a pipeline that is fully operational, and it was operational at the time they sued Greenpeace. Why would they do that when the company has gotten what they wanted? And it's really, I think, a look towards the future, to really send a message that if you do this, you could be next. You could face one of these lawsuits.
Yeah, well, I have to tell you, I was at Standing Rock, actually. I went there towards the end of the protests, and I actually got arrested. I spent some time in South Dakota jail there, and never once the whole time that I was there did I hear Greenpeace mentioned. Everyone I met there got there on their own power, made their own decision. There was I didn't see any evidence of any sort of coordination. So how can people follow what's going on in the case, and what can they do to help Greenpeace?
Yeah, and just before I get to that, to comment on your last point, that is actually the whole point. This was not a Greenpeace movement, and Greenpeace recognized that this was an indigenous-led movement, and the work that we did to support it really was, a beautiful, what I think is a beautiful example and showing of solidarity and what solidarity can look like for big greens. And so there's a reason you didn't see Greenpeace on the ground, because this was not a Greenpeace campaign. This was not a Greenpeace movement. And we took our role as supporting, not only the Standing Rock Sioux tribe, but other water protectors. We took that role very seriously. So in terms of how you can follow what's going on in the case, first, it's really important for everybody to know that this case is going to trial. After 7 years, we are going to trial in Morton County, North Dakota this summer. It's a 5-week trial set to start on July 29th. And in terms of, how you can follow what's going on and what you can do to help, we do have a petition and a solidarity letter that is really, it's really our first step. We are in the process of launching a campaign, but if you go to this website, you can sign up and you can get all the updates, and it's really a moment to show that you stand with Greenpeace in this moment. And that website is act.gp /open-letter. And perhaps I can, share that link, or you can share that link with your audience. But that's really just kind of a one-stop shop right now to sign up and to continue getting updates, and obviously on our website and hopefully more in the media and through podcasts like this, you'll be hearing a lot more about the story as we gear up for trial in July.
All right. So that's about it. Is there anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, well, I just want to really thank you for helping us get this story out there. And I just want to emphasize one thing that, I've kind of been referencing, but, we are, of course, preparing for the fight in the courtroom, but this really can't be the only fight that we prepare for. The truth is we don't know what the outcome will be in the courtroom. And so this is a time when we really need all of you because we can't win this alone. Winning in this moment has to be much bigger than the legal outcome. And so how we respond in this moment to this type of threat and this type of attack is really going to have a long-lasting impact as we look at the future. This is a test case, and we know that a lot of corporations are watching. So it's important that we all respond and commit to doing everything we can in the advocacy that we do and making our broader movement stronger than ever to send the message that we won't be silenced.
Yes, and refusing to be silenced is the heart of our program, the For a Green Future. We not only refuse to be silenced ourselves, but we also try to give voice to people, to environmental activists who are being ignored by the mainstream media, whose voices are not being heard and are being drowned out by the corporations that want to pollute the earth, or politicians that want to force bad policies on people. And a prime example of that is happening in California right now, because the state of California is forcing people in California, just an update on this story. The Public Service Commission there just added $750 million in charges to everyone's electric bills in California because Governor Newsom wants to keep the Diablo Canyon nuclear power plant running beyond all measure or reason. And so we interviewed Linda Seeley, who's with a group called Mothers for Peace, and they've been fighting the Diablo Canyon nuclear plant for decades. And so we were very happy to be able to give her a platform to share her fight and to explain why it's so important that Governor Newsom get defeated in this mad scheme to keep the nukes running. So let's hear from Linda Seeley. All right. Hello, and welcome back to For a Green Future. Could you please share with us your name and your organization?
I'm Linda Seeley from San Luis Obispo Mothers for Peace, and thank you so much for inviting me today, Joe.
Oh, my pleasure. And it's a pleasurable interview because we have some rare good news to talk about. But first, let's do a little background. So the subject we're talking about is earthquake faults. And, you guys have had a long history of fighting this situation there. Could you just give us a little history?
Yeah, Diablo Canyon nuclear power plant is built on the edge of the Pacific Ocean in the circle of fire, right on the ring of fire, I think it's called, the very earthquake prone area in the world that's considered to be the most dangerous. And back in 1973, when they started digging the hole to build the plant, the Mothers for Peace had heard that there were earthquake faults in the location, and PG&E, the operator of the plant, swore that there were no earthquakes within 50 miles of Diablo Canyon. And that was very shortly put to rest when they found the major earthquake fault called the Hawsgree Fault, 3.2 miles offshore. And subsequent to that, about 7 more earthquake faults have been found, and now we know there are at least two that run directly under the plant that have never been analyzed by PG&E, Pacific Gas and Electric.
Mm-hmm. The earthquake faults right under the plant.
Right under the plant.
Right. Now you guys have been fighting this plant for a long time, and it was at one point scheduled to be shut down.
That's right.
What happened there?
2 years ago, back in 2016, there was a deal made between PG&E, the governor's office, several environmental groups, the unions, I think that's it, to shut down Diablo Canyon at the end of its license term, which would be this coming November 2nd, 2024, and August 26th, 2025 for Unit 2. They made a deal. It was hailed all over the country as the best deal that had ever been made to shut down a nuclear power plant easily and with backup for the community, et cetera, et cetera. And then 2 years ago, our governor turned that upside down and basically blackmailed our state legislature into writing a law to keep it open for an additional 5 years because he claimed that we didn't have enough power to keep the lights on in California without Diablo Canyon. And that argument has been disproven too. So now we know that we don't need the plant. We know that it's built on earthquake faults, and we know that it's going to cost the ratepayers at least, the bottom figure is $8.3 billion to keep it online for another 5 years. The top figure there is around 12 billion. But of course, PG&E is very difficult to pin down with numbers.
Mm-hmm. Right. And those are just, both of those numbers, 8 billion and 12 billion, are estimates. And
correct.
Nuclear industry estimates have a habit of being, 2 to 10 times less than what they end up actually costing. So,
and there are no figures built into that about doing any retrofits for these new earthquake faults that have been analyzed. And there's nothing built in there about replacing the brittle reactor vessel in Unit 1 that has reached the end of its lifetime already.
So you folks, since that happened 2 years ago, you folks have been fighting the decision, the law. Unfortunately, yes. You haven't had too much luck, have you, the past couple years? No.
But we have had some luck in the past couple of weeks.
Okay, let's talk about that.
Yeah. And what that is that Mothers for Peace has an expert professor of geosciences at UCLA. His name is Peter Bird, and he's a very illustrious earthquake scientist. And we hired him to do an independent analysis and to look at these faults. Anyway, these are faults that are called thrust faults, meaning they have an upward motion. They don't go flat laterally. They have this upward thrust motion. And it's been known that that this configuration, the way that the coastline lies, that these are inferred faults, that everybody thinks they're there. They haven't had an earthquake on them yet. The only way you know if there's a fault, that there is a fault, is if it has been an earthquake there. That's what causes faults, earthquakes. Okay, so most of the major earthquakes that have happened over the past, since they've had the ability to record earthquakes, most of them have been on faults that nobody knew were there. And then after the earthquake, there was a fault. For instance, the 10.0 earthquake in Alaska back in the 70s, there was never a fault there. And then suddenly there was a 10.0 earthquake. The Tohoku fault that was offshore in Japan that caused the Fukushima triple meltdown, that was an unknown fault prior. And that was, I think, wasn't that a 9.0
I believe
earthquake?
so. Yeah, maybe 9.2.
So it's now our expert has calculated that this inferred earthquake right offshore Diablo is capable of a 7.5 earthquake. And then we have these thrust faults that are this past January 1st of 2024, there was a 7.5 earthquake in Japan. And it's called the Noto, N-O-T-O earthquake. And that earthquake, the configuration of it is very, very similar to the conditions at Diablo Canyon. And this is what the Nuclear Regulatory Commission has accepted as worth looking at. The fact that they're right over on this same ring of fire with the same kind of geological structure of the Earth, there was a 7.5 earthquake that caused the Earth to move 2 meters. That's like almost 7 feet in an upward direction. And when you think that there is a fault, there are 2 faults under the plant that could have that capacity to move buildings 7 feet. When those 2 buildings house nuclear reactors, the thought of it is absolutely frightening.
Yeah,
But,
I think
yeah.
it's safe to say they're not designed to be shifted around like that, to be shot
No,
up in the air.
no, they're not.
Yeah.
And then there are 3 other issues that the Nuclear Regulatory Commission is taking under consideration, the as well as what I've just told you. And your listeners and you can go to Mothers for Peace, just Mothers for Peace, all in one word, .org. All of the documents are housed there. And it's a pretty fascinating journey that we're going through right now with the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, because they are taking under consideration all of these issues. We have 4 separate issues that they're taking under consideration. And it could mean that we could get an earlier shutdown of this plant.
Wow, that'd be amazing. So yeah, you folks actually filed a formal complaint, right, back in March.
Correct.
And so this is the NRC's response to it. And I think it's also safe to say that the NRC has not had a good history of responding to concerns like these. So this is kind of an amazing thing.
Almost unprecedented in the history of the NRC to respond to, it's called a 2.206 petition. It's a citizen's petition alerting the NRC of a problem at a nuclear plant. And usually everybody said to us, that won't do you any good to file this petition with the NRC. They just end up in the wastebasket. But this one took them aback. And they allowed what happened is that they allowed our seismologist to testify before them. And he presented the information to them. And they apparently, from their response, we think they were pretty blown away by it. And the fact that PG&E has avoided analyzing these earthquake faults. When they say this is the most studied earthquake area in the whole world because of their team of earthquake scientists at PG&E. And yet this one particular area, the area right around the plant, is the area that they have not studied. And they have taken studies from around it must be around 100 miles south of us, and use those studies to stand in for the actual studies that they could be doing right at the plant site, but they are not doing those studies at the plant site. It's why would they want that? Why would they live here too? If the plant has a serious accident, they would suffer too. Why is this? Is it just coming from the bosses at PG&E? Or is it because they have so much faith in this technology and they think it couldn't possibly have a problem? I don't understand it. I wish I could get inside their heads so that I could understand it, and then maybe they would listen to us.
Right. And so this danger of like a catastrophic event isn't the only negative around the plant, right? You mentioned cost. It's going to be very expensive. Doesn't it also put cooling water into the ocean that kills wildlife?
Kills everything. It circulates 2.5 billion gallons of water through it every single day, to every 24 hours. 2.5 billion. When it comes in, it's around, the usual average temperature is around 58 degrees. When it comes in, when it leaves, it's around 78 degrees. So it's about 20 degrees hotter when it leaves. And in the process of when they suck it in, they suck in all the larvae and the plankton and the life that's in the sea. The sea is just filled with life. They suck it in and discharge it, and it's completely devoid of life. Now you think about that, 2.5 billion gallons every single day for 40 years. What kind of damage has this plant done? And now they want to keep it running for 20 additional years. They have applied for a license to run for 60 years altogether. And, there are so many reasons for it not to run, that the reasons for it to run have to be political. They cannot be based on anything about safety, about need, or about the economics of it, because it fails in all of those areas.
So our final little interview is an excerpt from our interview with Mark Jacobson, Dr. Mark Jacobson of Stanford, who basically has worked out all the numbers and proven over and over again that our whole country can be, in fact, the whole world can be powered solely with renewables and storage. No nukes necessary, no carbon necessary. You could really get to a green future, and it's practical and it's less expensive and people will be healthier. So I like to end on an up note. So here's our some excerpts from our interview with Mark Jacobson.
Hello and welcome back to For a Green Future. Could you just please share your name and who you're with?
Yeah, Mark Jacobson, a professor of civil and environmental engineering at Stanford University. We believe the world can transition all its energy to just clean renewable sources: wind, solar, geothermal, hydroelectric, maybe some tidal wave power, and at low cost, and thereby eliminating energy-related emissions that affect global warming, air pollution, and energy insecurity.
Right. And could you just remind us the title of your last two books there?
Well, last book was No Miracles Needed, and it's basically how we can solve the climate, air pollution, and energy security problems we face with existing technologies, and we don't need miracle technologies. And then the other previous one was 100% clean renewable energy and storage for everything, which is more of a textbook or more technical book on how to do the same thing, transition the world to clean renewable energy.
All right. And the reason I wanted to interview right now is because you just did a study that a lot of the people who oppose renewables, who oppose transitioning to carbon-free, claim that it's basically that it's impossible, that it cannot happen. But you recently did a study that shows that a whole bunch of countries and states actually are already there or almost there.
Yeah, in fact, there are 10 countries in the world that are 99.5 to 100% renewable electricity generation in the annual average. They include Albania, Bhutan, Lesotho, South Georgia and South Sandwich Islands, Nepal, Iceland, Ethiopia, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Costa Rica, and Paraguay. They all generate 99.5 to 100% of the electricity that they use or generate from just wind, hydro, geothermal, and solar. And there are in fact, there are 64 countries that are 50 to 100% renewables. And so, in fact, it's about 15% of the population of the world is in these countries that are between 50 and 100% renewables. Worldwide, the average clean renewable penetration is about 27%. But the biggest countries of the world are all below 30%. Of their generation is from clean renewable energy. And I should keep in mind that electricity is only 20% of all end use energy. So here we're just talking about electricity, not transportation, buildings, or industry, which also we want to transition to electricity. But when we do transition those other sectors to electricity, energy requirements will drop significantly. So we'll probably need twice as much electricity as today, but we reduce power demand by about 60%. And close to 60%, but we'll double electricity use. But the good news is the electricity sectors are already transitioning in many countries of the world.
Right. So while the electricity use drops, the other energy sources like gasoline, oil, natural gas just go away completely. So
yeah,
when we
correct.
switch to a carbon-free, so even though
Right.
electricity doubles net, there's a whole lot less energy and less pollution.
Yeah, like when we transition transportation, we'll get rid of gasoline, diesel, jet fuel, bunker fuel, and we'll replace them with electricity or hydrogen produced from electricity. And then the hydrogen is used to reproduce electricity in a fuel cell. And so that way we electrify all transportation. We eliminate all oil for transportation and we replace it with electricity. But it takes only 1/4 the energy in electricity to do the same job as oil products do for transportation. So in the case of transportation, we reduce the energy requirements, well, in the best case by 75%, but really in practice, it'd be maybe 50 to 75%.
There you have it. Not only is 100% renewables possible, but it's actually the most practical, the most economical, the healthiest for the people and the planet. And just a reminder, once again, as we say here on For a Green Future, either we will have a green future or we will have no future, because it's pretty clear, increasingly clear, that unless we make our green transition, there won't be a future for our society, for this global society we've created. Well, that's it for 2024. Thank you so much for listening, folks. Tune in next week. We'll be back with a live show. We'll be back on the air in the studio. And don't forget, you can always check out our website, Joe DeMare for agreenfuture.org, or you can send us an email, joe@joedemare for agreenfuture.org. Let's go get on and let's create that green future together. It's Joe DeMare signing off.
I don't want no oil a-spoiling my shoreline. I like fish much better than crud. I like birds and things a-creeping and crawling. Won't trade no more oil for blood. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. black demon oil's got us fussing and fighting.